We'd like to thank the following sponsors for helping provide this video.
Our moderator is our marketing and sponsorship chair, John Freeman. So I'm going to turn that over to John now. Welcome our panelists.
Thank you, John. So we're very pleased to have a really outstanding panel for this discussion. Let me just briefly mention what our procedure is going to be. We'll have each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly. For about a half hour, I'll ask them some questions and they can ask each other questions. The next half hour, we'll have a couple of microphones up and you can stand on one side or the other and sort of take turns, and we'll spend about a half hour answering your questions. And then at the end, we'll give them each 2 minutes to sort of summarize or bring out a couple of points they thought were particularly important. So that'll be our process, and we don't really know where this discussion is going to go. Might be some unexpected directions, and we're looking forward to seeing where it's all going to take us. So I guess, Linda, why don't you start? Introduce yourself.
Thanks. So hi, everybody. My name is Linda Cook. I am an employee at PayPal, and I'd like to know, just by a show of hands, how many of you are PayPal customers? Excellent. Excellent. So it's very easy. And I'm happy to say that I have the good fortune to work with some really fantastic people there. In my role, I have a bit of a split role. I'm currently working as the lead for the Agile program managers for one of our initiatives, and also the liaison for the Agile transformation coaches that work in our credit organization. Thank you.
Johanna?
Okay, I'm Johanna Rothman. I'm often known as the pragmatic manager for my newsletter. I've written 8 books, some of which are back there on the table if you would decide that you would like to look at them and maybe buy one of them. And I am agnostic about which Agile approach to use, and sometimes I'm agnostic about whether or not you should use an Agile approach. Because I wrote a blog post called Agile is not for everyone. Right? So sometimes Agile does not fit your culture. And we might actually discuss that tonight. Go ahead, Ken.
Let's get started.
My name's Ken Schwaber. It's fun to use the word Agile because people respond viscerally to things that may not be what everyone else is thinking. The word Agile in the context of software development was first used, and we spent about 3 hours trying to come up with it at Snowbird back in 2001, February. And it was used as a descriptor of 4 values and some principles, and that was all. And so anything that is used as the word Agile beyond that is something that people have been using and describing and may not be the same basis of values. So when I hear Agile, I think of the values. And if it's consistent and coherent to the values, I'm pretty fascinated. If not, it's an interesting marketing approach. And when you look at those, values, it's kind of hard to say, geez, no, we're not Agile. No, we really like not responding to change. Boy, I really cherish processes and tools and not thinking about how I'm using them. I mean, what?
And I think everybody has that handout. Do you want to talk about it now?
Oh, yeah. Handout, 2 things. One is, of course, for those of you that haven't seen it, it's the Agile Manifesto. The principles and the values. We heard someone say Agile, it's just a fad. We in IT go through fads every 10 years. And like, I didn't know you recycled values. And I thought they're the basis of a way of thinking and acting. And on the other side is something which is a metrics model of how Agile an organization is, not did you hold your nose Scrum and that, but is the organization itself agile? And the reason we're doing this is we're seeing all sorts of people stand up and say, hey, if you buy our product for $5 million, if you come to our conference for $17 million, whatever, you'll be agile. Well, no, we know that they'll be poorer, but that's all. And so we used to ask, at just sessions like this, we'd say, how many of you in your company have spent over $10,000 per person on becoming agile? If you were like, say, how many more than 100,000? We'd say, well, how many of you have increased revenues by this much through your agile initiatives? And no one measures, no one knows. And so that's why our industry is so prone to fads and bullshit claims, is no one knows. And in the face of that, snake oil prevails. And our concern, and that's why we're trying to bring some measurements into this, and not software measurements, but what are the outcomes of software within the organization, is so we can actually evaluate whether things are useful for your organization or not. And one of the things that was interesting that's of use for an organization is turnover of development employees. That would be a bad thing. So if you bring in a process, even if it's called Agile, and you increase your turnover, that was not necessarily a good thing to do unless you were trying to increase turnover. And so these are things you ought to start measuring and watching.
So we're going to have a few questions here as we go along, partly looking at, where is Agile today, and see what our panelists think. Where is Agile going, and what should we do about those things? So let me just, why don't we start with a little bit of kind of ground setting. Where is Agile today in terms of how widely is it accepted? So if you were to look at all of the organizations that potentially could be using Agile, number one, how many of them, or what percentage would you say would report themselves as being Agile today, or at least trying Agile? And then, if it's different, what percentage would you say really are doing some form of Agile? Anybody?
So I can speak for the people who call me. Many of the people who call me say that they're doing Agile. And when I actually discuss with them what they're doing, they use the terminology. But when they say refactor, what they mean is re-architecture, right? They take the code out of the code base for 3 months at a time, and there's no transparency. So they use the term stand-up. What they mean is a serial status meeting that goes on for an hour. They might have iterations, but the iterations are often 6 weeks or 8 weeks long. So they talk about doing Agile, but they have used the terminology or abused the terminology so badly that you cannot recognize it. Their stories span iterations, as in 3 or 4 or 6 iterations. So, and their iterations are 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks long. So they talk the talk, but they are not even close to walking the walk. And these are people who actually claim to be Agile, never mind the ones that want to be Agile. And when I ask them, have you read anything about Agile? They say, no. Right. So they haven't read any of your stuff. They haven't read any of my stuff. They haven't read anything by anybody, but they've acquired the terminology by the ether. Right. This is like putting a book under your pillow and thinking you're going to get the reading from it just by putting the book under your pillow. I'm not sure what the Standish or the Chaos group says. I'm not sure what Scott Ambler's surveys say. You can do all the surveys you want, right? People will self-report what anything that they want to. But when I see people and when I ask people say, half the people are doing Agile or 3/4 of the people are doing Agile. But what I see is substantially less than that are effective.
Okay, your turn.
less than half. What do you think?
Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to lean in Johanna's direction and say it's even lower. I'm thinking probably, we've just really cracked open the egg on this, right? And there's this combination of, so what is your level of self-proclaimed Agile? And then go back to, and the minute you start like chatting with people and talk about things like the Agile Manifesto, talk about, so what values in your organization resonated for you with the Agile Manifesto, we start to find that there's some disconnects, right? That the reasons companies have picked up Agile are not always centered on the values and the principles, and I think those organizations tend to run into more trouble. And at the same time, Agile has managed to become part of the universal language of how work gets done in software development organizations. So I feel like there's a bit of a twist there, that the claims of Agile and then the actual folks that are even trying, even the folks who are trying the 4-week iterations, at least that's better than 6 months. Yeah, you know? Some people have to walk their way through this and crawl their way through this. I don't know that that's a bad thing. My point is more that the opportunity for organizations to reap the benefit of the values and the principles is still there and is wide open.
I feel really bad. I mean, all those people who could and should be Agile and aren't. I guess that was a lot of effort for not much. So if they were using, they only had one iteration per release, and it was 9-month iteration. They're down to 2 4.5-month or 4-month iterations per release now. They're more Agile than before. If their competitor uses 2-day iterations, they're not as Agile as their competitors. So Agile, yeah. Aware of their competition? No. How many of you have smartphones with you? It's probably updating itself with fix or stuff while it's in your pocket or your purse. It's pretty Agile. It wasn't happening 10, 11 years ago. Farm equipment receives fixes and patches in itself while it's still running without a person operating it, like a combine or a tractor, John Deere. The changes in the upgrades in the way software is used in technology in the last 12 years, probably purely coincidental with the Agile Manifesto, is incredible. Our society cannot operate without software at this point. You have smart grid, you have all the instrumentation, you have all the networks, you have all the people getting in touch with each other. I have no idea who is Agile and who is not, but there's been a profound, incredible shift in our society through the use of software over the last decade. I don't feel any need to judge someone's agility because the marketplace is doing it for me. You know, if they're better than their competition and they're doing 2-month iterations, they're in a pretty quiet part of the market. God bless it. It's probably the last one in the world that's left. If they're doing 4-week iterations and they're in a typical marketplace where they're making money and someone has spotted that they're making money once instead of them, they better start doing better. And so what I hear in these descriptions of Agile is actually the idea of lean and waste. These are very wasteful practices these people are doing. So this isn't Agile or not. These are lean practices that can make them responsive and competitive in a way that is Agile in the marketplace. It could be based on these values in the Agile Manifesto, or it could be such as a company like Oracle or their Yellowstone. It could be, ruthless, scathing approaches toward the employees to get the most out of them, even until it hurts. Either way, they're pretty Agile, but not according to these principles, but they are fairly clean. So I'm really careful around the word agile because it's really a market, it's either these agile investors where we started it from, practices, values, or it's a market-driven thing that's responsive to a need in the marketplace. And so are you agile enough while I'm still employed and it looks good in the future? So far, so good.
So we have kind of a mixed picture here where a lot of people are saying they're doing Agile and they're not doing a very good job, possibly more than half are in that situation. On the other hand, software is progressing and we're seeing a tremendous activity there. Is there a danger that Agile will just get a bad name because there, are there too many failed, if there are a lot of failed examples and people said we tried Agile and it didn't work, is there going to be a backlash?
So one of the intriguing things about this situation is that we do have many examples of large transformations that have failed and failed miserably. And it wasn't for not spending enough money, not hiring enough coaches, not having executive support. But those examples exist. And with that, they still have the reality, and there are a few that we could mention, but I won't call out names here, that they keep coming back to it. Yes, they try an Agile transformation, they go through a lot of effort, they spend a lot of money, train up people, reorganize, restructure, start managing their products differently, and then somewhere something goes wrong and Agile is declared a failure. They abandon what practices they had adopted and they revert back to, if you will, old ways. And yet those same companies, when I'm talking about very large companies, within a year to 18 months, we see them back in the foray. The ads are out there for Agile coaches for these companies every year, and the calls don't stop coming in. So my point in sharing that is that while Agile might indeed fail and does fail in organizations, that there must be something to this because they just keep coming back. As of yet, there is another answer out there that's taking its place that said, well, we went Agile, that didn't work, so we tried banana pudding and it did.
When Churchill said about democracy, it's what was it? It's the worst of the worst system except for all the others. Is that what we're saying? Okay.
So I've looked at Agile, and it is 42%. These are standard group things. Better than waterfall. The velocity in several organizations is 1,200 times better than other organizations. The time to refactor is significantly better. Cyclomatic complexity has dropped by over 79%, and code coverage has gone up by over 114%, and this is primarily in the embedded software areas. Now that's bullshit. No one measures this stuff. No one knows. What you hear, even from us, amazingly, is opinions, beliefs, attitudes, feelings, moral judgments, all sorts of things, but none of us know. We have anecdotes, we have stories. If they're good and they're not too off color, you laugh and you're cherished, but none of us know. We don't know if an organization is agile or not. We don't know if they've gotten better or not. We don't know if they got better because they acquired 14 other companies or because they improved their engineering group. We don't know if they got, so what you hear is a lot of thoughts. I do know, and this again is my opinion, that we're seeing, and this happened to the Software Engineering Institute and CMI, is that as you start becoming more popular, lots of companies coming to make money off you. So you find lots of companies now saying, use our approach and you'll be agile quicker. And so you see a lot of charlatans and snake oil salesmen. And so there's a big money movement around the word agile. But until we start having something that allows software, a totally invisible product, which is a neat thing, And I can do great and you can't tell. I can do badly and you can't tell. Until we get some way of looking at that, these claims about agility and non-agility are opinion.
So let me add something here. One of the things I've noticed in companies, large or small, that stick with the ability to change, which is what I think Agile is the notion of culture, right? The people who say, we want to be able to change our backlogs, we want to be able to change our project portfolio, because we finish small stuff and we get feedback on it. And we finish what we do in an iteration, or we finish a minimum marketable feature, and we do retrospectives, and we change and adapt, right? We figure out what we're doing, and we improve on what we're doing as a team, as a management team, as an organization. They have changed their culture. And they change the culture at the team level, at the management level, and at the executive level. Those companies don't have the bounce back. And those companies make the money so that they keep going.
Or they learn from the bounce back.
Or they learn from the bounce back. So for me, Agile is a cultural change. And Agile allows them to do cultural change. And the companies that want to throw a bunch of money at Agile and don't do the cultural change, they don't really get Agile. So can you throw a bunch of money at a company and say, we will transform our company in 6 months, we will do Agile? Well, you can try. But until you all learn how to change, I don't think you can do it. Because Agile is a part of your culture. And I think I had to learn how to do Agile personally for a few years before I really got it. I had to learn how to limit my work in progress and how to make my story smaller. And then my throughput got really big. I tripled my throughput over the last 4 years by making my stories really small. Right? And I've been practicing Agile for a very long time.
You've been hanging out with other, you tripled your output.
Yeah.
Did you measure it?
Yeah, I actually have the number of articles I wrote.
Ah. But what was the quality?
It's really good. It's really good.
So the quality's going up too?
Yeah, the
So
quality is going
You
up.
probably factor the quality with the volume, with the appeal, with the customer satisfaction, with your employee satisfaction.
My employee satisfaction is very high.
Time to market's pretty good.
Yeah,
And if you were doing this in a non-sustainable way, then your ability to persist would be low.
but my ability to
We all know
persist
she's pretty
is very
persistent.
high.
Persistent. So these are all pretty good measures of
They are,
increased agility.
they are,
So
yeah.
you've been adjusting all of your practices
Yes.
so that you have more impact and more, you're able to reach your goals.
I am.
That's good.
It is, it's.
I wish that could work with more companies like you.
Yeah, but you all do perfectly.
So-
Yeah,
Some people.
Do measure. Some people
Right.
do measure.
and I have been measuring, so.
Many, but some.
So you'll notice that I actually have been putting out a book a year, my pragmatic manager every month, not the same time every month. I'm not that good, right? So I vary the time of the month, right? And I've been writing my monthly management myth, say that 3 times fast. And a monthly article with Andy Lester about careers, and all of my technical editor work for Agile Connection, which varies every month. That's totally unpredictable. And I think I have, and my quarterly column for for projectmanagement.com, and my bi-yearly column for technically speaking, right? So I actually have data on how many words I write, right, on all of my blogging. So I actually have data on this.
I'm tired just hearing about it.
Do you count the number of syllables of each word?
No,
So,
no.
so we see that Agile can be applied to writing and publishing, so let me
Yes.
follow up on that. Do we see Agile being applied successfully outside of software development? Are we seeing it used in other groups for other purposes successfly? And is that something we should be sort of encouraging, or is that just a?
Wait a second, the way you said we see Agile being improved, implied from what Johanna said, what is Agile? I still haven't heard that. I'm seeing the word being thrown here and there, everywhere, but what way Johanna used it, it's improving the effectiveness, efficiency, and value of her work.
Well, for me, it's about the ability to change.
But change, I mean, I can change, I can take my clothes off and change.
No, 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 no. Oh, not that. No, no. God, how did we get there?
So what is change?
So I changed my mind about what to do because I have a very small task and I get it to done. I can then change my mind about what to do next.
Okay, that's Agile, but is it directed toward a goal? So for instance, in Colorado with the legalization of marijuana, there's probably a lot of agility, but it's probably undirected agility.
Okay, so I have several projects on my list, right?
Mhm.
Right, and I have the program management book to get out, I have the management myths book to get out, I have the essays on estimation book to finish, I have all of these other things to do. All right, I have several stories, if you will, all of them on my backlog. And I can take a story because all of my stories are very small, and I can start one, get it to done, and then if a client calls me, I can just stop where I am, respond to the client, get something off, right? Do what the interruption is, because do we all have interruptions? Yes, but my context switch is very small because my stories are very small.
What's the story?
For me, it's a very small chunk of work, no more than probably 30 minutes at a time.
Okay, because when taking this Genesis point, the Agile Manifesto was written, stories were small pieces of work that engineers using XP did. It came from James Grenning, Bob Martin, and it's kind of been transmortified into something that means a requirement. If it's a long-term requirement, it might be called a big requirement or a capability, or if we're in true Vikings, it might be called an epic. If it's small, we might think of it as something actionable already. But you hear all these words and phrases which are thought of as agile. Other practices people use to be flexible and responsive.
Can I interrupt for a second? Mr. Moderator, what was the question? The question was, can Agile be applied outside of software development? Good idea or bad idea? I'm waiting to hear someone to talk.
Yes.
Excuse me, we weren't, I appreciate your interruption, I was waiting for it, but we are still working on the prior question, and can it be used outside of software? We're still holding off a few minutes, but thank you for your advice.
The quick answer is yes. I taught Agile to a bunch of analog chip designers, and they said, wow, this is exactly what I do all day, every day.
Bob Schatz, any of you know him? Out of Philadelphia, used to be Vice President of Engineering for Primavera, Scrum, XP company. His daughter teaches inner cities Philadelphia schools. Tough environment to grow up in. And she teaches them Scrum. And she said the reason why is it gives them control of their life to the level of an increment. They can set a goal, they can see what's interrupting the goal, they can try to accomplish something in small pieces in an environment which is chaos, in which they have no control. So it's them trying to gain some level of control over a very uncontrollable life. So the idea of breaking down things, if those of you who have ever looked at my very, very old website, it's Control Chaos. It's taking chaotic situations, hugely complex situations, and bringing them down to an area where they're lean and actionable, and it can create values that are satisfactory to the people using them. So the answer is, of course, yes, because it's a philosophy, it's a set of ideas to approach handling complexity and chaos. And my goodness, we do seem to have a number of situations like that. David Starr, a guy who worked on Microsoft's Visual Studio product for a number of years, he uses it in his family. A number of his kids, several of his kids have Asperger's. So it's a great idea to try to create some control and some regularity in potentially chaotic situations. He's written a book about it, so books are out there.
And we do have empirical evidence from many organizations who start with Agile practices and values in the software development context. And when they actually get it, they get the essence of what it means to work well together, to collaborate, to focus on goals, to iterate through, to learn as they go. The rest of the organization says, hey, those guys are on to something. All of a sudden, they're happy over there doing their work, and they're getting stuff done. Maybe we could pick up some techniques. And it's not to say that, whole other departments might pick up any of the frameworks that are available, but they're picking up various practices and applying them to their workspace. So, yes,
Well, I know a company where after the software, I know a company where after the software development was successful doing Agile, the marketing group was very excited and started to do their stand-up meetings every day and were having lots of fun and were doing stuff much better.
See, it's not the stand-up, right? It's the collaboration and keeping the work small. I think that's really the key, right? People focus on the stand-up. It's not the stand-up.
So I'm going to ask one more broad question, and then we'll let the audience have their turn. What about the evolution of Agile right now? And I'm thinking of two things, really. One is, are we sort of seeing one Agile going forward? Are we perhaps going to see a fragmentation where people who focus on Scrum go one way and people who do Lean and Kanban another, and maybe there's other flavors? Are we going to see, as it matures and becomes bigger, people going in different directions? Is there going to be some new wave that comes and sort of doesn't invalidate Agile but subsumes it and becomes the new thing? And I used to be involved in application service providers, and nobody today is an application service provider. They're a SaaS company or a platform company. So it's sort of chugging around there at the bottom. Cloud. So, ASPs are still sort of there, technically, but nobody says they're one anymore. So where do we see Agile going kind of as a movement or as a thing?
so first you'd have to start with where I believe Agile is. And the use of the word Agile is all-encompassing of many things, of several frameworks, of several different practices in various groups. And we've seen it go beyond software development. There are now defined practices with IIBA. There is a whole movement going on around DevOps that I'm very excited to see. And I think we'll continue to see these movements grow out of a need for change. Whether or not we'll call it Agile, I really don't know. But we definitely are seeing the impact of the work that was started back in 2001 with the declaration of the manifesto. I think we'll continue on for at least a number of years.
So I am totally agnostic about whether or not it's iterations or Kanban. I actually wrote an article called "Why Do We Have to Choose Between Them?" Right, so I don't actually care. And my crystal ball is has never been transparent. So I hate predicting the future. In fact, in manager job search, she said, use personal Kanban inside 1 week iterations, okay? So I don't actually like having to choose between things. I think you should use the best of both worlds. I don't think you should have to choose. I don't understand why should I have to choose among things when I don't know what the future is going to be. On the other hand, I really like Scrum as a project management framework. I really like Kanban as a way to see waste in the system and see work in progress, right? Why do I have to choose between things and not know what I'm going to see in the future? So I think if you are thinking about starting an Agile approach in your company, you should be reading everything you can get your hands on to see what might work for you and expose your bottlenecks and they explain to you, how do we see our work? How do we help ourselves focus on the smallest possible thing of value that will allow us to change and make ourselves, help ourselves get value to the business faster?
So if I step back and look at the marketplace, where software is our last scalable resource, everything else you have to pull from Europe somehow. And I look at the criticality of it, in a competitive environment, the increasing population, the need for more and more software in our world, anything that increases one's ability to be responsive, to create things that are of value and of more value than their competitors, and to do so in a way that creates things that sustain our world and our companies, I think is going to succeed. And to me, that's an agile way of thinking, eliminating waste, being lean, being responsive, creating value. It doesn't matter what it is, the economy and our world situation drives the need for that. And it'll be called agility until maybe the situation is so complex where it's called pandemonium. But right now, agility is a good phrase for it.
See what happens when we get to the pandemonium software methodology.
Oh,
So,
you won't have to worry.
there's a few of those already. All right, so we're going to have a couple of our volunteers with microphones on either side. If anybody would, back there, if anybody would like to ask a question, please go to one area or the other. Please make them questions, not declarations, but other than that, feel free to ask away.
Hi, hello, and good evening. The question relating, especially had the handout of the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Principles, and I'd looked at them before and took another look again. And I did the exercise both then and now of matching which of each of the 12 principles pertain to which of the 4 manifesto items. And the result kind of struck me that out of the 12 principles, a majority, like around 7, relate to the individuals and interactions part. And it's only the other 5, they're just kind of spread around the other 3. So was there an intention that the individuals and interaction part of the 4 manifesto items is really the important part and gives rise to most of the principles, or was that just happenstance? And how is it now?
More happenstance, we came up with the value statements during the first day and 3 quarters, and then we thought we ought to have principles, so we worked on principles almost divorced from, but within the context of the values. So we weren't trying to map them at the same time, they were just very valuable principles that we thought should be stated. So we weren't doing object modeling with this. No inheritance. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Given that quite a few companies today are doing Agile but whatever that means. What, in your experiences, and this is a two-parter, would you say are the top 3 things that companies that are trying to do Agile on a piecemeal basis or trying to be Agile on a piecemeal basis, what are the top 3 things they can do that will do good, whether or not they ever get to be Agile, and what are the top 3 things that would do harm?
That's too big a question.
Yeah.
Which is the first thing that they should do to do good, right?
First, do no harm?
No, make everything smaller. One of the things that people are so accustomed to doing from a traditional project standpoint is they have big documents, right? They have requirements documents, they have project plans, they have big projects and programs. I'm starting to write my Agile program management book, and one of the chunks in it is what to do if you're starting a program and you've been given 1,000 people. Programs often start with 300 people, right? The very first week, for no good reason. And you also are given this big requirements document, right? You're given huge functional specs. There are no good reasons for starting a project with an enormous backlog. There is no good reason for starting a project with a ginormous project plan. You are not going to finish the project that you started that way, right? The architecture is not going to be the same as the one you thought it was going to be. So start it a lot smaller. Start it like this. You have a shot of starting something like that. So when you ask us for the 3 somethings and the 3 other somethings, I've already lost you with the first 3. Right? So ask me one question and then allow me to change something. Right? That's how you can be Agile. Now, you can ask me the other part of the question now, because I don't know what it was.
So if you would think of one thing that an organization which was trying to become Agile should not start out with, because it would do more harm than good, based on your experience, it sounds like it's that too big thing, but I just want to confirm that.
It depends on the context. Organizations are different. Every organization has its own Achilles heel that will cause catastrophe. I'm at the Ohio Department of Public Safety. I'm trying to get a ticket fixed, and it turns out they want to use Scrum. And they decide that the best thing they can do is have open space. So they create this huge open space floor, which is, if you think collaboration, maybe open space will increase collaboration. Suddenly employees are leaving left and right because the loud voices echo all over the place. People have no privacy, no ability to think. So they're going back to all the literature. They say, but collaboration, people working closely together, get rid of the walls. I've heard this is a good thing, and so they do what they think is a good thing, spend a lot of money, and have turnover that puts them in the back pocket for another half year. If you look through a lot of the principles, and the thing that I struggle with when I go into any organization is to somehow get some transparency about what they can and can't do. And the 1,000 people with a huge document, oh my God, and you start raising questions about where'd you get that from? Where did you find up 1,000 people? So the question is always get some transparency. What can you do right now to create some software so that I can evaluate your skills and your capabilities, and we can talk about all the reasons why this was so hard for you, why it was so hard for you just to create a small piece of software which your customers can look at. Why is this hard for you? Oh, you have 1,000 people. Can we take maybe a smaller number of those and just create some software? Oh, we don't have standards. Okay, well, why don't we create non-standard software and see what standards might be needed? So somehow to get them to, if you look down the principles, to create something of value to the customer that the customer can respond to. And it's like going on hey, I'm going to get healthy and fit type thing. The moment you start trying to do something useful and valuable, you find all the things that get in your way, and then you can start working on it by bit. But there's no three things, there's no three plus or minuses. There's instead, start trying to do something that actually relates to what your place in the organization is, building valuable software, and find out why you can't and get rid of it. But meanwhile, try to get some software out. It might take you 2 months. Oh, that's better than before. But what I often find out is people who say, well, yeah, but we can't because, no, we can't, that's a problem here. Our culture, I mean, the number of reasons people are wasteful and slothful and incompetent is phenomenal. And it's so easy to sit back and gripe about it rather than do something about it. Those of you that are religious, this is good. Those that aren't religious, either way, we only have a short amount of time on this earth. You know, do something that's satisfying and gratifying and find a place to do it. Don't sit around and gripe and grumble about how you can't. We have one of God's greatest given professions in the world. You get to take things people can't see and make great things out of it that, you know, work with your buddies on it and give it to your customers and get some good satisfaction. If you can't find satisfaction from that, maybe you're in the wrong industry. I mean, you have 1,000 people in great requirements document. Let's go elsewhere. These people are so screwed.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one is about...
Wait, that's a sneak.
That's a sneak?
That's a sneak. You get one and then you have to go back to the line.
So I'm just curious, how do you measure innovation rate? That's the first question. The second question is more used toward the last question the person is talking about. So it's basically Agile being next. So we know there's adaptive frameworks like Kanban and Scrum, and the prescriptive one, which is like RUP and XP. So does that mean that we need to do more on the prescriptive side to be more agile? When in terms, to me, it's continuous improvement, right? So like, do you want to adopt like continuous integration, automated deployments, or like continuous delivery? I'm a technical guy, so that's why my question is that way.
Try that.
So I'll do the innovation rate because that's real quick and it's fine. It's the ratio of your budget that is available for new development versus the amount that has to go to maintenance and continuing sustenance of a product. So if you're looking at your ability to innovate in the marketplace and your budget's $1 billion, but $950 million has to be spent on maintenance, you're not very innovative.
And what was your other question?
It was the practice area for software development.
Okay.
So Scrum and has no practices. We had hoped that XP and Scrum would merge.
Right.
So we have those great practices. We're seeing a lot of them inculcated through the ALM vendors because they point out the absence of good practices and produce metrics that show it. However, we're finding that ALM vendors are very greedy. They have invented a new thing called DevOps, which helps them sell their things, when really we used to call it just are you done or not done. But now it's DevOps, and it'll drive another $1 billion. But you know, good engineering practices, we've known what they are for years and years. Getting the people to use them so you actually get done increments with no technical depth is incredibly difficult. And some of that's education. It's not the absence of the knowledge of them. It's so going back a step. The 2 habits that we're just having a bear helping people get over are their desire to predict what's going to happen
Sorry.
And so the moment you believe you can predict what's going to happen, then the people that work for you have to do whatever they have to make you believe that that's possible, including getting rid of all those good engineering practices. And the other is the belief that because I'm maybe higher paid or better titled than you, I'm responsible for making you do what I think is the right thing to do. So the belief that people are resources that should be told what to do, and you're the smartest thing that ever walked the face of the earth. And the two of them come springing out of us, out of Waterfall and Predictive for 20, 25 years of use, and they are just impossibly difficult for people to get over. It's very easy and comfortable to have them continue, but they're the things that erode and get rid of our good engineering practices more than anything else. We have one huge company whose name starts with an M that believes there are three initiatives that should be happening right now. One of them is responding with all their products to a new operating system. Another is building a cloud-based operating system. Another is getting rid of technical debt. So all the Scrum teams have to take on product backlog from all three of them every sprint. So that's people believing that they can predict and tell people what to do, rather than listening to the people saying, boy, that's really stupid. We can't cast switch like that.
Well, that's why I don't use their products. Okay.
We didn't hear that. Can you say that line again?
She said that's why she doesn't use Apple's products.
Hi, my name's Jack, and I'm a recovering methodologist.
Hi, Jack. It's nice
to meet you. Rehab, and it's right here. I'm conscious of the fact, having read, for example, Jim Highsmith's book on Agile software development, that there are, in fact, methodologists happily practicing what they can to try to create some kind of structure around which people can act in a way that reflects community and the values of the manifesto and so forth, but still manages to do things like find out how many legs the stool should have and make sure that there is a leg for every place there should be a leg. And at the moment, there seems to be a lot of initiatives where companies try to do Agile, but they're picking and choosing without any concept of whether or not there needs to be a required set of some things that work together, particularly if they're not reading up very much, right? So they don't have a notion that you have to be able to do incremental builds very rapidly. You should be trying to do regression testing to keep up with those incremental builds, to validate the code. And so they may not be really prepared to try to stand up the stool because they only have a couple of legs, some of which don't belong there in the first place. So it's not necessarily enough to try to do, it seems to me, some of these practices alone or even as a set without knowing something about what do we need to complete the set that will make this stuff work together. And obviously it doesn't have to be perfect, but do you have some sense for whether or not people are thinking about things that way other than, let's say, Jim Highsmith writing books about it?
Is Jim still alive?
Yeah, well, he is, but you know that Ken wrote books, and you know that I wrote books too, right? Okay.
And she has books for sale in the back of the room.
Thank you. So I think that people don't realize that in order to be Agile, there's this whole system. Right, in order to get to an increment of done and know that you can actually change at the end of it, right? I keep saying the whole point of Agile is change, right? That you get to this increment of done. And regardless of whether you use Kanban or Scrum or some other approach to your project, because I don't actually care, you want to be able to do this again. So you have to actually finish what you set out to do. So you can take something else off the backlog. And the only way you know if you're done is if you can take something else off the backlog and start something new. Right? So if you're not really done, if you're kind of squishy done, right, you're kind of got dangly bits over here, right? And you're not really comfortable with done. If you don't have regression tests, if you're not fully checked in, if you're not really done, right, however many dones you need to say, to say that you're really done, right? I hate this business of done, 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 done,
Dun, dun, dun.
I mean, how many dones do you need? I thought one done.
You're not done when you end it with done, 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 damn it.
I like that. I like that. Okay,
That ends the dones.
Done, damn it, done.
Yes.
Okay, okay, if you're not done, damn it, done, then, I mean, when, you know, how can you say that you're possibly done? I got lost.
That's
So-
okay, let's come.
Yeah, so you have to be able to take something new off the backlog, whether you're in the next iteration or in this iteration. So I don't understand how people think that they are agile if they are not there yet. Okay, save me.
Should have seen them before.
Okay.
Let me
yes,
just-
Johanna has the 100,000 people or 1,000 people, or a stack of requirements. And
It could be two requirements, it doesn't matter.
you gotta turn them into something you can ship that customers hopefully will pay money for. That's good. And somehow you have to establish an environment, standards, conventions, tooling, ways that people will work together, team structure, hierarchies, architectures, infrastructures, within which those people will work. They will turn those requirements into something that's done. And it has to be done before you turn them loose, otherwise you just have chaos. And in a lean environment, this is setting up a production line which can handle, by and large, fairly complicated stuff, but allow for some flexibility and looseness and adaptability and intelligence. In any agile environment, you've got to have defined those standards, conventions, infrastructures, architectures that will be developed within. In the absence of people understanding that, we see things like SAFe and stuff like that being sold and used. Methodologists selling it as I used to work with Coopers and Lyman, they would sell their Summit D to every organization regardless of type. It wasn't appropriate to every organization. So a methodologist defining, and this could be the architects, the QA people, all that, an environment within which done software can be developed every increment and added together to create a shippable product is, to me, a methodology. The lean infrastructure for development, it has to be there. Otherwise, what we'll see is what Johanna said, which is undone crap at the end of an increment. That shows the degree to which things are not in place to create them.
So let me just, is that kind of a minimum evidence that somebody is really doing Agile? What you just said, you know, the increments with a done project, a done or demonstratable product at the end? Would you say that's like the minimum that really makes up Agile? Or shows somebody doing Agile?
You can show that they have an intention of doing better if they're doing iterations and they have increments they look at and say, what do we have to do to make these better? Otherwise, what they're going to do is they just instituted a system where they have what's known as a stabilization phase that's as long as the project.
Sorry to interrupt, but Linda, what would your view on be sort of, what's sort of the minimum that people would need to do for you to say, yeah, this is really Agile and not, you know, just a smorgasbord of random pieces?
Every organization has to start where they are. It's the only choice they have, right? And then to the points that Johanna and Ken have been talking about, take a small set of work, put a small group, not 1,000 people, together, and give them a small time frame. And in the context of your organization, you decide what small is. And then from there, it's simply learning from the work that you've done and changing based on what you've learned, right? You get better through learning. We also learn the things we don't want to do, that really is the basis of walking the path toward agility for your organization.
Thank you. I think we have time for 2 more questions, and then we'll give the panelists a couple of minutes each to bring out some highlights.
Hi, so I certainly have heard one of the threads of the conversation today being, you know, what is that the word Agile mean? And, you know, we sort of put a lot of things under the banner of this word. And I think Ken went back to the core values, from 2001, as Johanna mentioned, that it's about culture. But I guess, so that's kind of, I do believe that it comes down to a set of values, and all the frameworks and practices and everything kind of derived from that. But is that those 4 values from 2001, are they still right? Do they need to be refactored? What do you think are the current sort of values that define that?
Well, I haven't heard the values change that much. Are they situational, or these were meant to be responsive to any environment which requires creativity, and creativity operating in a fairly complex, open environment.
So you got them right in a day and a half, Ken?
Pardon?
So you got them right in a day and a half?
No.
Well, we've been struggling with it for years and years. The people who were invited had all been developing what were called quick methodologies, or small methodologies. So we've been working with this for 10, 15 years already. And we got together because we said, hey, looks like we're all coming toward the same type of thing. Why don't we see what ideas we have in common? And if not, we could go ski and drink and play cards, whatever. And we found out, we started by just sharing what each one, describing what each one of our approaches to this was. And we said, there's a lot in common here. Why don't we start writing down what we have in common? We came down very quickly to it was values, our approach to difficult situations, to allow us to be creative and come up with the best answer. I think if we start losing these values, the interesting thing is, what values are you going to replace them with? I can predict the future. That's an interesting value, because I'm smarter than the next dude sitting next to me. That's another one. Yeah, or whatever. I can make more money than the person next to me, no matter who gets hurt in the process. I can produce products which will make a lot of money for my company, even if people die. I can ship ignition switches, which is, whatever.
Let me interrupt for a minute. So even though the Dukes didn't invite this dude yet, which I was really pissed off at, I had been doing the same things from a project management perspective for years. And I wrote what could be the first iterative planning article in 1999. I wrote the seminal paper on inch bevels in '98. Right? It's all out there on the web. My values are the same as the ones there, right? We don't disagree on that stuff, right? We might disagree on some of the details.
What do we disagree on?
I'm not sure yet. I haven't written the program management book yet.
That's an instantiation of the values.
Right. So the values are there because they're values. If you're asking about specifics,
Are they still right? That's my thing. They haven't changed.
yeah,
in 13
the
years.
values.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the question I want to ask back is, do you find there's a value missing?
Right. That's a good question.
Or is one wrong?
Yeah.
Are you
Did you get
calling?
one wrong?
Are you calling us perverted people who don't have values?
No,
I just believe in the continuous
well,
improvement nature of our work,
you.
right? So I just was wondering if you had discovered any additional values or any incremental change in those values, whether or not they'd be tweaked, right? Like they sort of, as you say, those values came out of 10 or years and years of you and the other sort of people that were there. Their experience in sort of culminated in 2001, but there's been a lot of change in the last 13 years. I don't know if another group got together, would they come up with the same set of values today?
I don't know. By the way, what we called all of our processes were lightweight processes, and the reason we called them Agile instead is calling them lightweight just opens them up for attacks. Well, that's too lightweight for this. This is serious work.
You were not there when the CMM was the process du jour. I can only tell you, we had big honkin' binders on everybody's shelf. Who was there when the CMM, was this, who Who else went to total quality management training? Oh, was that a horror show? I went down to Winter Park, Florida for 5 days. I've got TQM. I gotta tell you, it was an experience.
But there's some good.
So I think there's actually a more important aspect of the manifesto
Yeah.
and the values that are stated there. I was clearly in this industry before the manifesto came along, but it was the first attempt to change what we were doing from some prescription for which we had no basis of understanding. Whether it went back to Method 1, TQM, CMMI, none of them gave us a way to ground in a belief system of how we do our work. To me, the real beauty in the Agile Manifesto is that we can agree or not on the values that are there and use that as a basis to form how we want to work together and to come up with our own contracts for getting stuff done.
It's almost a good point for an interview when you join a company, is to talk about the values that they play out.
Yeah.
I was, just a short segue, in 2003, I was at a conference called INCOSI, which is a DOP conference, and I was in an Agile panel, and I think, I forget whose work was there, and we also had the CMMI, this Software Engineering Institute people, Bill Curtis and Mark Paulk there, and we were supposed to fight, you know, like, we're right, no, you're right. And instead, Mark said, hey, we don't think we have any disagreement. We actually started the whole effort that we're after to improve the profession of software development. We think it needs to be improved. And if you look at all the practices and the way we structured it, we think that, you know, this should be improving the practice of software development. He said, but, you know, the moment that this became a real big Department of Defense thing, because that's our basis for funding, and the moment people were able to make a lot of money off it, teaching you how to be level 1, 2, 3, and then coming in and assessing and inspecting whether you were level 1, 2, 3. The moment that people were able to make a lot of money from this, it all went to hell in a handbasket. And we're real curious, and we'd like to ask you guys from the Agile movement, you've got the same goals as we do, how you're going to prevent your entire thing from turning into the same crap that ours did when people can make a lot of money off it. And that's exactly what we're seeing now is, you know, the gold rush is on.
So, I'm sorry, questioners, we better cut off the questions here because it's just about out of time. I'd like to give each of the panelists 2 minutes summary, or maybe focus on, what do we need to do? What are your requests or recommendations to the audience so that we can move forward in the right way? A couple of minutes each, please.
For me, being in a community like this is the most important aspect that I find value in my career. So I want to first say thank you for spending the time tonight away from your family and friends to spend some time with us and talk about something that we're all very passionate about. And to that end, I hope that we will continue to have conversations like this. I think it's most important that we all get out of our personal space, wherever that is, whatever company, organization, foundation, whatever you work with. It's great to get out, talk with others, test new ideas, try something different, experiment, experiment, and experiment until you find a place where you and your whole crew are happy. And if I could get us to have only one metric for all of this, it would be based on some sort of happiness factor, with happiness from our customers and happiness from the people who are trying to make our customers happy. If we could figure out how to make that the only metric in companies, then I think we could get away with a lot of lower value-added conversations that too many of us get involved in from time to time.
I think we have the best profession in the world. For it ever not to be satisfying, for us ever not to find fulfillment in, when our society needs its outputs and its fruits so desperately, is a totally unacceptable situation. So my advice to you is the same I have, which is keep trying. You see what happens, try again, try again. Life is about trying, you know? finally maybe you'll stop trying, but that's usually called death. So keep trying, because you've got a great profession, and the output is definitely needed. It's a pleasure, coming to meetings like this and seeing everyone. We've been doing this, we started Soft Pro Books back in 2002 with 5 people. This is an ongoing effort. We're looking for so many people to try.
So for me, Agile is all about the ability to change. And for what I wish for you is for you to figure out what makes the most sense for you. And you might not have found it here. You might not have gotten all your questions answered. You probably didn't get any of your questions answered. And I invite you to continue the conversation with me. Send me an email, jr@jrothman.com. I will be happy to answer the email. Thrilled, actually, to answer the email. So I thank you very much for your attention tonight. I'm very happy that you were all here. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that.